Hello everyone. This is Integrity About Research. I'd like to show you how my research on a cultural paper, 1 or 2, begins through avenues outside the library, takes on new forms and new momentum by just a couple clicks within the password protected space of CCBC's online libraries, and then can continue on further. So today my topic is going to be Mali. Mali is a country that started to appear in the news, even in the United States, around 2012, when the French military went into Mali to try to stabilize following some unrest with the Tuareg people and with jihadist, some very extreme Islamist groups that came in and kind of hijacked cities, so to speak. So, as you can tell, I'm not even 100% sure about what went on exactly. I saw a lot of news reports and I watched debate shows, but I perhaps was a bit distracted at the time. But it was already in the back of my mind. Like, why is France going back into Africa? France used to be a colonial power, and that's why a lot of Africa speaks French. So what is their force doing there? And then, Mali's right next to Algeria. I've heard about characters, I've seen characters from Mali that come into some of the books that I read by Algerians in French, especially Algerians writing about taking treks into the desert towards the area where they share borders with Mali. And just recently, this kind of interest I had in Mali that was in the back of my mind kind of came back again as I looked on the Facebook page of my friend Amel, who's an Algerian writer and historian herself, and she's recommending a book to people like me who would be interested in knowing a little bit more. She writes here in French, Un Algérien à Tombouctou, récit de voyage. So here's a travel story, and it's an Algerian who's traveling to their neighboring country, Mali. And she writes here, Si vous désirez partir dans le Sahara jusqu'au Tombouctou en toute sécurité, sans être kidnappé ou enlevé, sans rencontrer des militaires français et américains, sans croiser les soldats de Dieu de Boko Haram, sans marcher à contresens des Maliens et des Nigériens fuyant leur patrie, pour être ensuite malmenés dans les pays frères voisins où ils recherchent protection, je vous invite à lire Un Algérien à Tombouctou. Now this beginning paragraph already is putting us from the perspective, into the perspective of someone who's on the ground walking and who's not necessarily protected. A different perspective than someone who's reading the news from their safe position in the West or in Europe or even in another part of Africa. And yet it's an invitation to take an adventure alongside this writer who's going to give them a safe passage to Timbuktu through, of course, their literature. They're saying, okay, if you want to go to Mali and you don't want to have to worry about running into French or American military vehicles. I'm a little bit surprised. I didn't know that there were Americans in Mali, but maybe Anna knows something I don't. Or maybe she's exaggerating the presence of the West. If you want to go here without being kidnapped or taken by soldiers from Boko Haram, and the Boko Haram is in the news a lot these days. If you want to go without running into people from Mali and other countries like Niger or Nigeria who are fleeing their homelands and seeking safe passage and protection in neighboring countries, then perhaps you should read this book, Un Algérien à Tombouctou. You're going to be traveling to Timbuktu in an old car and deux chevaux, as they say, and this is going to give you a passage into the land before it became so dangerous as it has since the 2012 crisis. You're going to be perhaps a bit nostalgic as you travel through a country that you could no longer travel in as you're going along, and maybe your car breaks down and villagers give you hospitality and you meet other people along the way from passage to passage, from city to city, from stopover to stopover. Another travel guide that I also look at talks about Mali from the perspective of those who were able to travel there before 2012 as a wonderful place to travel with so many different routes to take and passages, and you can admire the old trade routes and that are still trade routes linking Africa to the Arab world or to the Silk Road, and you can see the beautiful manuscripts of the former empires, and you can see the mosquée en banco, so these very special mosques that were built out of banco. And then I read in the bottom, but for reasons of security, you should not. Le ministre des Affaires étrangères déconseille de se rendre au Mali. So this travel guide, Routard, tells us the Foreign Affairs Office in France is formally advising its citizens, French citizens, to stay out of Mali, especially along the north, along la ligne Dié-Diémy, Marcala, Moti, Sévaré, Bancas. So here I am. I've just taken you to two different sources. I know these sources are very credible because I know the woman Amel Chaouti is an Algerian who's often between France and Algeria and participates in lots of book fairs with other African writers and writers who write in French and in Arabic as well. And this is a book that was edited. I can see it was edited by Édition Alger Livre, so it's an Algerian publisher. And then Routard. I know Routard is a good travel guide because I have friends who write for Routard. And I know that they spend about 8 months of the year traveling the world to take down information about these different countries. And yet, I still find that my facts, my impressions, my understanding of Mali is not really clear. So, one more thing. There's a lot of films that may also be kind of making me want to do some more research on Mali. I see a film that was done in 2014 and won a prize at the Cannes Film Festival about the occupation of Timbuktu by militant Islamic rebels. And this film is by someone from Africa. His nationality, the film is Français et Mauritanien. And I also see there's other films out there from the 1960s that represent the perspective of Westerners still under in the colonial period. And so this will be more biased. So there's so much to see. It's time to do some research before I kind of develop a paper in which I may read, and read some books and watch these films. I first want to do my cultural paper. So here I am on the web page for CCBC Library. If I don't want to go to one of the 3 libraries at the Dundalk, Essex, or Catonsville campus, I go here. I could just start here, getting started. Search for articles, books, and more at once. Just very, very general. So I put Mali. Here's what I get. Search results. 301,902. The ones on the top, I see, I have electronic resources, TV in Africa, Point du Jour. So here's a recording. A message from the River Network Ireland television. So these are some interesting resources. And I also see the Brat Travel Guide. So just by putting the word Mali, I'm going to see a lot of resources. Now when I go to click on these, that's when the library is going to prompt me to give my my password and my user ID. And you have your password and user ID are connected to your CCBC credentials. How Samba became Viceroy, Mali, electronic resource, production via Le Monde. So I have a lot of good media. Another media, Culture and Customs of Mali. This is great. I can find media that is not just literary. I can also find sound and image, films, documentaries, and I can watch them from the safety of my own home. All right, back to the CCBC library. Let's think of another way of going about this. I could do books and media, or article databases, or research guide tabs. Here's the article databases. Now, I see general purpose databases, I see business, I see current issues, cultures, diversity. So you can do kind of parallel searches. For example, you may be interested in psychology, or you may be interested in the music of Mali. So you may do some general purpose research of Mali, using perhaps the Credo reference, or you may, at the same time, parallel to this, you may do humanities, art, literature, music in Mali. So you can kind of find the different people who've written on Mali from the perspective of music studies, or education, or cultures, diversity. Here's what I get when I look into Credo. I get a lot of different encyclopedia entries, encyclopedias, fact book. Here's what I just clicked, cultures, diversity. Now, this is interesting. African American Studies Center. I may find, by clicking on African American Studies Center, some great scholarship by African Americans on Mali, perhaps its history, perhaps its immigration in the 20th century, or perhaps the history of Mali for those who want to go back and retrace their African heritage. And then they'll be going into the deep history of Mali, going back thousands of years. I may click on Britannica Country Comparison. I mentioned before that I was, as someone who has done a lot of research on the history of France in Algeria and the history of Algerians living sometimes in France and now in Algeria, but writing in French, I may want to do a comparison. What is it like to live in Algeria as opposed to Mali? These are neighboring countries. Algeria is a country that is influenced both by the Arab civilizations and the Berber history and the French colonial history, whether they like it or not, it's influenced them, as well as their African roots. So let's see, what are some facts that will stand out to me? Facts. These are great resources to get to fact. Fact, that means these are edited and very strong, credible sources. But of course, you're all going to look at the same fact differently from your own perspective. Some of you may be interested in the language. I look, this is interesting. The official language of Algeria is Arabic. That means because of the post-colonial tension with France, they will not recognize that many people do speak French in Algeria. The official language and their future is vested in the Arabic language. And the official language of Algeria is Islam. Now, how interesting to see. Mali is a country with so many Muslims, but they don't have an official language, religion. And their official language, on the other hand, is French. So, that means all government business, all commerce, all education and literacy is in French. But when I look down here, literacy percentage, you don't get that on the screen the way I have it, but the literacy percentage in Algeria, it's in the 80% for men and about 60-some% for women. Literacy in Mali is about 30% for men, 16% for women. So some people may see this as a really troubling fact. Perhaps we can look at it differently, though. This shows that institutionalized education and education reform are not as strong in Mali, which is a country that is struggling with poverty. This also tells me something about the French language. Although their official language is French, perhaps that means, though, that really only 30% of the population being literate, only 30% of the population is learning how to speak French. That means most of the people that you're going to speak with in Mali are not speaking French. Or there's a French that's kind of spoken in the streets that may be heavily influenced by the local dialects. And I see that there's a very big rural population. Interestingly, in Mali, the urban population is about the same percentage, 30%, as the literate population. So I imagine Mali being a place with small villages and then some urban centers where you have schools and people are speaking French, and there's the places of official business the banks in French, but then you have a large part of the population that's not speaking French. Here I keep going. I want to keep doing research. This is the countries and cultures. This is going back. Now I'm going into the article data, the research guides that were developed for you. Countries and cultures are research portals that are for you as students writing their cultural paper. Here's Gretchen Wright. She put it together. You can actually send her an email with questions, or as you see, you can also do Ask Us Now. You can ask 24 hours, 7 days a week. You can ask a reference desk librarian that is logged into this center for help. Or you can click on books, articles, websites, or citation help for further help. I just clicked on, I think, websites, articles, and I got quintessential. This is an interesting source. Country profiles, global guide to culture, customs, and etiquette. And I do Mali. And they start talking to me about, you need a translation service for Mali to travel there and do business. And here I found, just by looking at this quintessential, I found some interesting information about Mandanka. That's the language that people are speaking. And I see that this is a language that crosses over national borders. It's a language spoken in Mali, Gambia, Niger. Here's the Global Road Warrior. This is another great database that you have in the countries and cultures part. And look at all of these great Mali points of interest, Mali life cycle, Mali superstitions and folklore. So perhaps you're a doctor and you want to go to Mali. You can look at the healthcare and where would you fit in? Mali superstitions and folklore. So you look at the oral heritage of that 60% of the population, or in some cases for women, 80% that's not speaking French necessarily, doesn't know how to write. What does their oral heritage look like? So you look into the folklore. Cell phones. How do people in Mali communicate? Cultural stereotypes. This will give you a better sense of the different cultural stereotypes. Sports, women in culture. So women aren't really up there with literacy. So what does their oral culture look like? What does their life look like? Holidays and festivals. Here's another tab in your countries and cultures database. Citation help. Choose your manner of citing and then stick to it. That means citations are when you are pulling facts from a database or information that you didn't know off the top of your head. It's not common knowledge. And either you cite it in quotation marks because you find a passage that's very well written that you couldn't write better yourself, so you're not going to paraphrase, but you're going to cite it. Or you're going to be paraphrasing and working this information into your paragraphs, into your writing, but you do have to give credit because it came from someone else, so you have to give credit. Your documentation style tells you how to give credit. Are you using footnotes, or are you using parentheses in which you give the title and the page number? Your documentation style, once you choose it, it has to be thorough. And we live in a day and age where it's so easy. You can oftentimes, with the work that you do online, you can just find where they have the documentation citations, and you can just copy paste. Or you have all of these different online sources that tell you, oh, if you're taking from a journal article, or you're taking from an interview, or you're taking from a web page, this is how you do it. They understand. They've kept up with the times. We're not just working with books in the library anymore. For more help, go back to the library page and look at these links. How do I find a book? How do I find articles? How do I get a library card? How do I cite? How do I write a paper? How do I do research? How do I evaluate sources? Whether you're new to the world of academics or you've already been working at a university level for several years, this is the type of information you have to refresh. It goes in and then goes out once you're done with the paper. I've written a dissertation in the past using MLA. Guess what? I need to go and refresh my memory about MLA. If you ask me right away, can you do footnotes with MLA? I'd say, I think so. think I could only do footnotes in certain cases, but I had to do a lot of paragraph with page numbers. You see, you forget. You have to refresh. Most importantly, though, besides knowing how to cite and give credit to other people for the ideas that they gave you, you have to know how to research, and that your research doesn't start with what other people write. It starts with you. You know, what is your purpose? What is your interest, as in I was talking before, where did my interest in Mali come? What would my topic be, or the essential question? What do I already know about the topic? I was just kind of playing around with some sources of information before. I would have to sit down, not just talk it through, but sit down and write it out. And then find where is my topic today? My topic tomorrow may go somewhere else, but where is my topic today? And what are some of the topics and sub-questions? And then I would start to really research and write and take notes in my own hands, because I'm absorbing the research and I'm making connections. It's my research based on other people's research. I give credit where credit is due, but I'm writing my own paper. There's no risk that I'm going to start just rewriting what other people wrote, because I'm looking at other people's information relative to my topic. Here's where you go on iLearn. There's a voice recording activity where I have some questions. Again, this is part of the research. Being able to kind of voice in a voice recording your own ideas will save you from just being a copycat about others' ideas. Now pretend you've gone through, you've done your research, it has taken you from A to Z. You know, what's the next step? The next step may be to further develop your topic for Mali. After you've written your Mali paper, your cultural paper, you may decide, this is going to also influence my cultural paper too. Your cultural paper too is kind of an event or some kind of interactive media project that you undertake to better know this culture. You kind of try to push the boundaries of your French language, and then you write about the experience. What did you learn? But it's more about you writing about your experience. It's not a proper research paper. So maybe I want to go to RFI. This is Radio France Internationale, Les Voix du Monde. And I click on Africa. And let's say I decide my research project is to kind of scour the news for information about Mali, as well as its neighboring countries, for 10 days. And for 10 days, I'm going to go and I'm going to read articles. I'm going to listen to the news about Africa. And I'm going to try to see how they talk about Mali today and Mali's neighboring countries as well. And I'm listening to the French news. And of course, the French news, as you know, many countries like Mali, their official language is French. And so when people listen to the news from other neighboring countries, or even from expatriates who are living in France or in America but are very concerned about their native country of Mali or Niger and Cameroon, they want to hear the news read to them in French. And so France is a great language for bringing together these different nations that are French-speaking, but also they have multiple oral dialects. French is really, to use the word coined much earlier, centuries ago, it's the lingua franca once again. This is Google Images Mali. As you see, now that I've done the research, all of these images that perhaps would have created a very emotional reaction in me before doing the research, now I'll look at them differently. I'll perhaps know and understand what mosque we see in the upper left-hand corner. Or I'll know more about this great vast desert that we see, the Sahara. Or when I see these picture of these men with guns, I'll perhaps be able to identify, are these African troops? Are these national troops? Are these Boko Haram? Or why are these men wearing blue? I like this picture. It's a beautiful woman. It says smiling pearl or fula woman balancing calabash on her head. Perhaps after doing research, I'll be able to say, oh yes, a calabash. Oh yes, that necklace she's wearing, that represents, or yes, the way she's dressed, that's normal that she would have her hair back in a turban, and then when she goes into pray in the mosque, she pulls it around her face and it's a veil. There's little details. There are so many details that stereotypes can't give you. Doing research and going to the different images You're constantly asking questions. How do these people dress? When do they dress? Where do they dress? What does this mean for someone who understands all of the finer details and the different variations within the culture? Your cultural paper 1 or 2 are supposed to start opening up, not closing the chapter of your research. Once you begin research, you should just keep the world open. It could be an open dialogue. And here's something I found. It's a blog about a cultural event, Festival sur le Niger. Having done research, I now know that this doesn't mean it's a festival that's set in the country Niger, but it's about this beautiful river that runs through Mali and many countries, the Niger River, and it's a cultural festival trying to bring together in solidarity for peace all of these different diverse but not necessarily enemy cultures of Mali and its neighboring countries. So I see there's a lot of people using art and music to emphasize peace as opposed to rival factions. And I can go to YouTube and do more research and watch Festival sur le Niger and find out about local singers. Toumani Diabaté, I don't know who that is, but now I will. So this could be something that is kind of a supplement to your research online for Cultural Paper 1, or it can be the next step, Cultural Paper 2. You're going to kind of use online resources to attend some cultural festivals and then write about it. Voila. Okay, my daughter is now vying for attention, so this will end our Integrity slideshow. I hope that I have inspired you to take your research to the next level. I look forward to reading. Bonne journée, bonne soirée.